The security guard did not look her in the eye. Not the cold wind, not the gate clicking shut like a verdict, not her suitcase scraping the stone path. It was Roy, 6 years on the Harrington estate, always warm, staring at the gravel and saying nothing. Nora stood alone on the private road, 31 years old, 6 months pregnant, 2 bags. That was all they had allowed. She had not cried when Cole slid the divorce papers across the dining table at 8:17 that evening. Had not cried when he said, in a smooth, practiced voice, that the marriage was over. That she must have seen it coming. She asked if the baby changed anything. He said his legal team would handle custody. She set her fork down, walked upstairs, packed what could not be replaced: the ultrasound, her grandmother's watch, her passport. She stood one moment at the nursery door, palm pressed against the wall she had painted herself. A soft blue-gray called Quiet Shore. Then she came back down. He did not look up. "I won't sign tonight." "Then Roy will help you with your bags." Now she stood in the October dark, hands flat against her coat, feeling the baby shift, slow and steady, like someone turning in sleep. She had not called anyone. She did not dial. She didn't need to. Because at the far end of the road, headlights appeared. Then another pair. Then 2 more. 4 black SUVs, no logos, no markings, rolled to a perfect stop outside the iron gate. The rear door of the second vehicle opened from inside. In the warm cabin light sat a woman in a navy coat, a Cartier watch on her wrist, watching Nora the way someone watches when every decision has already been made. Nora got in. Behind the second-floor window, Cole stood watching. He saw the vehicles, the driver. Then, a silver monogram on the rear door handle. V.C. He called his attorney, voice low. Full background on Nora, her family, everything, tonight. "Is there a problem, Mr. Harrington?" Cole stared at the empty road and said nothing. But the confidence he had worn all evening was gone. In its place, the specific cold weight of a man who may not have known who he married at all. 3 months earlier, Nora had told herself it was nothing. That was the word she kept using. Nothing. The way you press a bruise lightly and convince yourself it doesn't hurt because you pressed it gently enough. It started on a Tuesday in August. Cole came home 2 hours late from what he had called a routine investor call. She was in the kitchen, barefoot, 7 weeks pregnant, eating crackers because nothing else sat right in her stomach. He walked in smelling of something that was not his office, not paper and leather and the faint trace of his Mont Blanc pen, but of a restaurant, close air, warm lighting, a place where people leaned in when they talked. She said nothing. The second time, it was his iPad. She had picked it up to check a restaurant reservation, their reservation, for their anniversary dinner, and the screen lit up on a conversation thread.
She only caught one line before the screen went dark, but one line was enough. She set the iPad face down on the counter and finished washing the dishes. She told herself she had misread it, that she was tired, that pregnancy made everything feel more fragile than it was, but she had not misread it. The third sign was smaller than the others, which somehow made it worse. A gift box, small, pale blue, tucked behind his dress shoes in the closet. Tiffany. No receipt. No card. She held it for a long moment, feeling the clean weight of it, then put it back exactly as she had found it. She never asked him about it. Looking back now, standing outside that locked gate, she understood why. Because asking would have made it real, and she had wanted, more than anything, for it not to be real.
She had been 6 weeks from her due date when she chose to believe him. She had been wrong. And somewhere in Manhattan, Danny Prescott had been counting on exactly that. Danny Prescott had introduced herself at a prenatal yoga class in Chelsea. That was the detail that would later turn Nora's stomach. Not the betrayal itself, but the precision of the entry point. A yoga studio, soft lighting, women in their second trimesters sitting cross-legged on mats, vulnerable in the particular way that only expectant mothers are. Open, trusting, too tired to be suspicious. Danny had unrolled her mat next to Nora's, smiled the kind of smile that asked for nothing, and said she was 12 weeks along. They talked for 40 minutes after class over paper cups of ginger tea at the studio counter. Danny asked thoughtful questions. She remembered details from one conversation to the next. She brought Nora a book, a soft-covered journal with a note that read, "For everything you'll want to remember." Over 6 weeks, Nora had told her things she had not told anyone else. That Cole had seemed distant since she announced the pregnancy. That he worked late more often. That the apartment felt quieter in a way that had nothing to do with noise. Danny had listened carefully. She said the right things. She suggested it was stress, that men sometimes needed time to adjust, that Nora was doing everything right. What Nora did not know, what she had no reason to suspect, was that Danny Prescott was not 12 weeks pregnant. She never had been. There was no baby. There was no due date. There was only a role she had agreed to play, a studio she had researched in advance, and a man who had given her a specific name and asked her to get close. Danny was Cole's financial advisor, had been for 2 years. The relationship had shifted sometime in the spring, quietly, the way dangerous things often do. She had not come to that yoga class by accident. She had come with a purpose. And the journal she gave Nora, the one sitting on the nightstand back inside that locked house, had been chosen because it looked like kindness. It was not kindness. It was reconnaissance. The invitation had come with Cole's name on it. The Harrington Properties Annual Charity Gala. The Plaza Hotel, 5th Avenue. Black tie, October 3rd. Nora had attended every year for 4 years. She had organized the seating chart for 2 of them. She almost did not go. 5 months pregnant, feet swollen, and something she could not name had been sitting in her chest for weeks like a stone. But Cole said appearances mattered, that she knew how these things worked. So she wore the navy gown she had altered twice to fit her stomach. Pearl earrings his mother gave her. She rode with him in the Mercedes to Midtown while he talked about the expansion deal the whole way, and she looked out at the Manhattan skyline and said the right things at the right moments. They were separated within 20 minutes of arriving. Cole moved toward the senior investors at the far end of the ballroom. Nora found her seat, accepted a sparkling water, and smiled at the woman beside her, whose name she immediately forgot. She saw them from across the room. Cole and Danny. Not standing apart the way colleagues stand, not the careful distance of professional courtesy. Danny's hand rested on Cole's arm in the unhurried way of someone who had done it 100 times before. Cole leaned down to hear something she said. He laughed, the laugh Nora had not heard from him in 4 months. Nora pressed one hand flat against her stomach and kept her face completely still. 40 people, she knew, were in that room. She did not break. But when she stood too quickly to reach for her clutch, the room tilted. Her vision narrowed. The woman beside her grabbed her arm. Hands. Voices. A wheelchair from somewhere. Nora was guided through a side exit while every camera in the ballroom turned to watch. Cole did not follow her out. Danny watched from the bar, expression flat, unreadable. The next morning, the photo was everywhere. A pregnant woman alone in a wheelchair, being pushed through a service exit, her husband nowhere in the frame. The caption did not need to say a word. The image said everything. 4 days after the photo ran, Cole asked her to sign. Not in the morning, when the light was forgiving and there was coffee. At dinner, 8 o'clock, the Hamptons house. A Friday night in October, when the last of the summer staff had gone and the estate felt emptied of everything except the two of them and the wind off the water. He placed the folder beside her plate.
Not across the table, beside her plate. Petition for dissolution of marriage. She looked at it. Then she looked at him. Cole was cutting his steak, methodical, unhurried, as though he had already moved past this part of the evening in his mind and was simply waiting for her to catch up. The legal team finalized everything, he said. It's fair. The Park Avenue apartment, 3 years of support, full medical coverage through the birth. And Owen? She asked. Shared custody. Reasonable terms. He looked up. You'll be taken care of, Nora. That was never going to be a question. She studied his face. The face she had woken up next to for 5 years. The face she had planned a future around. And she understood clearly that he had been preparing this for months. The folder was too clean.
The terms too rehearsed. This was not a conversation. It was a closing. I won't sign tonight, she said. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not anger. Inconvenience. He set his knife down and reached for his phone. Within 10 minutes, Roy appeared at the dining room door. Behind him, a second staff member. Between them, her carry-on and laptop bag, already packed. She stood slowly, hand against her stomach. You packed my things, she said. Cole looked back at his plate. I had someone take care of it this afternoon. This afternoon. While she had been upstairs, talking quietly to Owen about nothing in particular, someone had been moving through her closet, preparing her removal like a line item in a calendar. She walked to the front door without another word. Roy held it open.
Still not looking at her face.
The gate clicked shut. The road stretched dark and empty ahead. Until it didn't. Eleanor Voss did not hug her daughter. That was not how they were. What she did was step out of the SUV, look at Nora standing on that gravel road with 2 bags and a 6-month stomach, and say nothing for 4 full seconds. Long enough to take everything in. Then she said simply, "Get in. You're cold." Nora got in. The interior was warm and quiet. Leather seats, no music. The kind of silence that belongs to people who have said everything and nothing over many years and learned to exist somewhere in between. Eleanor did not ask what happened. She already knew. That was the thing most people misunderstood about her. She did not gather information dramatically.
She gathered it the way water moves through stone, slowly, without announcing itself. Until one day the stone was simply different. She had known about Cole Harrington for longer than Nora realized. After the cars pulled away and the estate lights disappeared behind the trees, Eleanor spoke. "I looked the other way because you asked me to. I want you to know I understand why you asked." Nora stared out the window. Her throat was tight. "I needed it to be my choice," she said. "I know." A pause. It was. No accusation. No, "I told you so." Eleanor reached into the seat pocket and produced a bottle of water, handed it across without ceremony, and returned her attention to the road. It was the most maternal thing Nora had seen her do in 10 years. They rode in silence through the dark. The Cartier watch on Eleanor's wrist caught the passing highway lights, a small, steady glint. The same watch she had worn every single day since Nora's father died. The one she had never once taken off. Until now. Eleanor unclasped it slowly, turned it over in her palm. "Your grandfather gave this to your father," she said quietly. "Your father gave it to me." She set it in Nora's hand and closed her fingers around it. It's time it went somewhere. It was needed. Nora looked down at the watch. Cool metal, worn edges. Decades of mornings. And for the first time since the gate had closed behind her, she cried. Not because she had lost something. Because she had just remembered what she still had. Nora did not call Cole back. Not when his attorney left 2 voicemails. Not when a process server appeared at the Upper East Side address and was turned away at the lobby. Not when Cole sent a single text at 11:17 on a Tuesday night. "We should finalize this before it gets complicated." She read it, set her phone face down, went back to work. That was the part no one saw. Not the grief, though it was there, arriving at 2 in the morning when the building went quiet and everything pressed down. Not the fear, specific and practical, the kind that comes with legal documents and unanswered questions. What no one saw was the work. James Whitfield arrived on the 3rd morning with a leather portfolio and a coffee from the corner spot on Lexington. Voss Capital's senior legal counsel, 11 years in the role. He had met Nora once before, briefly, at a company dinner when she still used her mother's last name. He remembered her. She had not expected that. "Cole's team filed a motion," he said, "requesting a psychological evaluation before custody terms are finalized." Nora met his eyes. "I know. It's a pressure tactic, no real merit, but if we don't respond correctly, it gains traction." "What do we need?" she asked. James noted it afterward. Most clients asked what they should do. Nora asked what they needed. A different question. It meant she was already thinking past the immediate threat. They worked for 4 hours. James laid out what Cole's team had prepared and what they had failed to account for. Nora read every page without rushing, made notes in the margins in her architect's handwriting. Small, exact. She did not rage. She did not plead. She built. Cole was already moving forward. New investor meetings, expansion announcements, the behavior of a man who believed he had won cleanly. He had no idea that every quiet day was Nora adding another layer to something he could not yet see. Something permanent. Something already standing between him and everything he thought he owned. And James, watching her work from across that table, her hand resting lightly on her stomach between pages, made a decision of his own. One that had nothing to do with Voss Capital. Cole Harrington had always trusted his instincts. That was what the profiles said. What the Wall Street Journal real estate column had written twice. What he said himself in the Forbes interview 2 years ago, sitting in his midtown office on the 44th floor with Manhattan spread out behind him like a reward. Trust your instincts. Move fast. Don't overcomplicate what's working. It had built him a company worth $400 million. It had also made him the kind of man who did not look too closely at things that already appeared to be going his way. The Northeast Corridor expansion was the largest deal in Harrington Properties history. 6 development sites from Philadelphia to Boston. A funding structure that had come together faster than anything Cole had managed before, which he took as confirmation that the timing was right and the market was ready. He did not ask who was behind the Anchor Investment Fund. His acquisitions director flagged it once in a Tuesday morning briefing. The primary capital source traced through a Delaware holding structure with no public-facing name. Cole waved it off. Delaware holdcos were standard. Tax efficiency, privacy preference. Nothing unusual. He did not ask the name behind the holding company. He did not ask because the numbers worked The timeline was clean, and Danny had reviewed the term sheet and told him everything looked fine. He trusted Danny. That was the second mistake, though he did not know it yet. What Cole did not know, what no one in his office had connected, was that the Delaware Holdco traced to a fund registered in Washington, D.C. That fund had one named beneficiary on its original incorporation documents, filed 7 years ago.
Nora Voss. Not Nora Harrington. Not the woman he had sent out his front door with 2 bags and a letter from his attorney. Nora Voss. Her name, her fund, her signature already woven into the financial foundation of the biggest deal of his career. He was 3 weeks from closing. And across town, in a quiet Upper East Side apartment, James Whitfield set a folder on the table in front of Nora and said 4 words. "It's time. He's ready." Danny Prescott had always known how to read a room. It was the skill that had gotten her everywhere. The Midtown office, the access to men who made decisions that moved markets. She understood how power worked, who held it, who was losing it, and when to switch sides before the tide turned. She had been watching Cole for 2 months. What she saw made her uneasy. The expansion deal was moving on paper, but Cole had started sleeping badly. She could tell by his morning arrivals, coffee already in hand, eyes that had been awake too long, a sharpness in his voice that wasn't focus. It was worry dressed as control. He was not as certain as he appeared, and Danny Prescott did not stay close to men who were losing ground. So, on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks before the Northeast Corridor closing, she made a call she had not told Cole about. A contact inside Voss Capital had quietly reached out through a third party 6 weeks earlier, suggesting there might be a conversation worth having. She told herself it was professional due diligence, understanding the full landscape. She did not tell herself the truth, that she was already negotiating her exit. The meeting happened at a coffee shop on Lexington Avenue. 2 women at a corner table. Danny arrived first, ordered black coffee, checked her phone 11 times before the other woman sat down. It was not Eleanor Voss. It was a senior analyst from Voss Capital's legal division. She set a single manila envelope on the table and said nothing while Danny opened it. Inside were copies of documents Danny recognized immediately. The same term sheets she had reviewed for Cole. The same numbers, the same dates, but with one addition on the final page that she had never seen. A clause initialed in small, neat letters. N.V. Danny looked up slowly. The analyst folded her hands and smiled with no warmth at all. "Ms. Prescott," she said. "Mrs. Voss already knows exactly what you have been doing." She paused. "The question now is what you plan to do next." Eleanor Voss had not built Voss Capital by being reactive. She had built it by being 3 moves ahead. By the time an opponent recognized the shape of the board, Eleanor had already decided the ending. It was not cruelty. It was precision. And precision, she had always believed, was the highest form of patience. She did not punish Danny Prescott. She hired her. Not officially, not with paperwork. With a single instruction delivered through the analyst at that Lexington Avenue coffee shop, in a voice quiet enough that no one at the neighboring tables could have heard a word. Danny would continue exactly as she had been. She would return to Cole. She would stay close. She would remain his trusted advisor on the Northeast Corridor deal. And at a specific moment, a date and time Eleanor would communicate in advance, Danny would deliver one piece of information that Eleanor's team had carefully constructed. A market projection fabricated, precise enough to look real,
significant enough to change a decision. In exchange, Danny's name would not appear in any of the proceedings that followed. She would walk away clean. Danny had agreed in under 4 minutes, which told Eleanor everything she needed to know about the kind of person Danny Prescott actually was, and confirmed that using her was the right call. Cole received the projection on the Thursday morning.
It arrived in his inbox from Danny's work address, formatted the way all her reports were formatted, carrying the quiet authority of someone he had never had reason to doubt. It showed an accelerated closing window, a competing buyer entering the Philadelphia site, a narrow 12-day corridor to lock in the full funding structure before the opportunity closed. He called his acquisitions director, moved the closing date forward. He did not call his attorney to review the underlying fund documentation one more time. He did not look at the name behind the Delaware holdco. He signed the accelerated timeline that afternoon, leaning over his desk on the 44th floor while the city moved below him, completely unaware that he had just stepped through the exact door Nora had quietly left open. 3 floors above the street, in a building on Park Avenue, Eleanor Voss set down her phone and said nothing. She didn't need to. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. Cole had reserved the large conference room on the 44th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, direct view of Midtown, catered breakfast, 12 chairs. His acquisitions team on one side, development partners on the other. The one room he used for closings, he wanted people to remember. He arrived at 9:40, stood at the window for a moment, looking out at the city, feeling the satisfaction of a man who believed he had arranged everything correctly. By 10:03, the door opened, and 2 people walked in who had not been on the guest list. A man and a woman, both in suits. The woman carried a leather portfolio. The man set a document binder on the table without being invited, and did not apologize for it. "My name is Richard Hale," he said. "I represent Voss Capital. There is a matter requiring the room's attention before any signatures are exchanged." Cole went very still. The development partners exchanged glances. His acquisitions director looked at Cole. Cole looked at the binder and did not move. Richard Hale opened it without rushing. "The Northeast Corridor funding structure includes an anchor investment fund registered in Washington, D.C., he said. That fund was established 7 years ago under the Voss Family Trust. Its sole designated beneficiary, the only individual with legal authority to authorize disbursement, is Nora Voss Harrington." Silence. Complete silence. The kind that fills a room after something irreversible has been said out loud. "Mrs. Harrington has not authorized the accelerated closing timeline," the woman added, placing a second document on the table, "which means this funding structure cannot be executed today. Any signatures collected would be legally unenforceable." Cole's Mont Blanc pen was still in his breast pocket. He had not taken it out. Across the table, one of the development partners slowly pushed his copy of the agreement aside. Then a second partner did the same. Cole Harrington, CEO, 44 floors above Manhattan, the most important deal of his career, dissolving in front of 12 witnesses, finally understood what the initials NV had meant all along. Not a fund, not a formality. His wife. The one he had sent into the October dark with 2 bags and a locked gate. She had been there the entire time. The development partners pulled out by Friday, not loudly, not with press releases. That was the particular nature of how these things ended in Cole's world. The real damage happened in silence, in emails sent to other people, in calls he was not part of. By the end of that first week, 3 of the 6 Northeast Corridor sites had new interested parties. None of them were interested in Cole Harrington. His board called a meeting for the following Monday.
He sat at the head of the table the way he always had, composed, controlled, the posture of a man who had chaired 100 difficult meetings. But the room felt different. The way a room feels when the people in it have already had conversations you were not included in. His CFO presented the exposure. 12 minutes, clean slides, no editorializing, just numbers, and what the numbers meant heading into Q1. The numbers were not good. After the CFO finished, no one spoke for a moment. Then the board chair, a man Cole had known for 9 years, who had been at his wedding, set his copy of the report face down and asked one question. Cole, did you personally review the fund documentation before signing the accelerated timeline? Cole said he had relied on his advisors. The board chair nodded slowly. Your primary advisor on this transaction was Danny Prescott. Yes. A pause. Careful, measured. Ms. Prescott tendered her resignation this morning, the board chair said. Effective immediately. Cole had not known that. He kept his face still, but something shifted behind his eyes. The sickening recognition of a man realizing he had trusted the wrong person, and that the wrong person had already arranged her exit without a word to him. Danny was gone. The deal was gone. The reputation he had spent 15 years building was collapsing across a Monday morning boardroom while 12 people watched and said careful, measured things that all meant the same truth. He had done this to himself. Every single step, every assumption, every shortcut, every moment he had chosen to not look closely enough. And Nora, the woman whose name had been on that fund document the entire time, had not needed to make a single aggressive move. She had simply waited and let him walk. It happened at 4:52 in the morning on a Thursday in November. No dramatic warning, no long build-up. Just Nora, awake in the Upper East Side apartment, reaching for her phone on the nightstand and knowing, before she had fully sat up, that tonight was the night. She called James first. She would think about that later. Why him before her mother? She had no clean answer. She only knew that when she looked at her phone in the dark, his was the name her hand moved toward without hesitation. He answered on the second ring. No grogginess, no irritation. I'll be there in 12 minutes, he said. He was there in 9. Eleanor arrived at New York Presbyterian 40 minutes later, navy coat. She walked into the waiting area, saw James already seated with 2 coffees from the all-night place on York Avenue, and sat down beside him without a word. They did not talk much. Her mother and her attorney, 2 people who had spent decades in rooms full of argument, sitting together in a hospital waiting room in near silence. Eleanor drank her coffee. James kept both hands around his cup. At 6:18, a nurse appeared at the waiting room door and said everything had gone well. Eleanor stood immediately. James stayed seated, giving her the moment that belonged to her. The nurse led Eleanor down the hall. When she walked through the door and saw Nora, exhausted, hair pushed back from her face, holding a small wrapped bundle with both arms, Eleanor stopped in the doorway and pressed one hand flat against the frame. She did not cry loudly. She did not cry the way people cry in films. She stood there and let something break open in her chest that had been closed for a very long time. Nora looked up. His name is Owen, she said. Eleanor crossed the room, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked at her grandson for the first time. Outside in the waiting room, James Whitfield set down his empty cup, leaned back in the plastic chair, and smiled at the ceiling. He had reviewed 1,000 legal files in 11 years at Voss Capital. He had never once felt anything like this. 3 months after Owen was born, Nora Voss walked into the Voss Capital boardroom for the first time. Not as a visitor, not as Eleanor's daughter, quietly sitting in a corner while the adults handled things. She walked in as co-chair, because the board had voted 11-1 in favor, and because Eleanor had stood at that table and said, without sentiment, that the company had been waiting for this specific person for 7 years. Nora wore a charcoal blazer she had bought 2 weeks earlier on Madison Avenue. Simple, well cut, nothing that announced itself. She carried a leather portfolio, not the kind that said she was trying to impress anyone, but the kind that said she had already done the work, and this meeting was a formality. She had done the work. 6 weeks of preparation, late nights at the desk after Owen went down, a cold cup of tea going untouched beside her laptop, page after page of financial reports and development strategies and board notes going back 4 years. She had read everything Eleanor had sent her, and a great deal more that Eleanor had not. James had sat across that table with her more evenings than either of them had counted, pushing folders across, asking questions, occasionally saying nothing at all and letting her think. She had needed that, the silence of someone who trusted her to arrive at the right answer on her own. When she sat down at the head of the table that first morning, the room adjusted. Not dramatically, just the small collective shift of people recalibrating who they were in the presence of. Eleanor sat 2 seats to her right. She did not look at Nora with pride or satisfaction. She looked at her the way a person looks at something that has finally arrived in its correct position. Nora opened her portfolio, set her pen down on the first page, and began. No announcement, no speech, no moment designed for anyone else's benefit. Just a woman, sitting where she had always belonged, doing the work she had always been capable of. Cole Harrington's name did not come up once during that meeting. It did not need to. It was a Sunday morning in December when James asked. No grand setting, just Central Park, winter light coming pale through bare trees, and Owen in the stroller in a cream wool hat Eleanor had bought and pretended was practical rather than an act of love. They had walked 20 minutes in comfortable silence when James stopped near a bench by the conservatory garden and turned to her. He did not get down on one knee. He was not that kind of man. She was not that kind of woman. Somehow he had understood that without being told. He reached into his coat and held out a small box, clean lines, no ribbon. "I'm not asking because of Owen," he said. "Not because of Voss Capital." A pause. "I'm asking because every version of my life that makes sense has you in it." Nora looked at the box, then at him. She thought about the gravel road, the locked gate, 2 bags, and the cold. The long drive back to the city with a Cartier watch pressed into her palm. Late nights at the desk, folders between them, and the quiet presence of someone who asked nothing except that she keep going. She said yes. Not because she needed rescuing, not from gratitude, but because she was choosing, clearly, with both eyes open, from a position of strength she had built herself. They walked back through the park. Owen slept in the stroller. James carried the box in his coat pocket. 2 miles across the city, Cole Harrington sat at his desk in a midtown office half the size of the one he used to have, and opened his laptop to the morning news. The headline read, "Voss Capital announces record quarter under co-chair Nora Voss." He read it once, set the laptop aside. He had always believed the city belonged to people like him, people who moved fast, trusted their instincts, never looked too closely at what was already working. He understood now that he had been wrong. The city belonged to people who built quietly, who walked out of locked gates with nothing and came back standing somewhere no one could reach them. Smart women do not argue for their place. They simply return, higher than where they left. And that is exactly what Nora did. And just like that, the story comes to a close. Hey, if you're still here with me right now, that tells me something. It tells me this wasn't just a story to you. Something in Nora's journey touched a part of you that maybe you haven't talked about in a while. And I just want to say, I see that. I really do. Because here's what this story was really about. Underneath all the drama and the locked gates and the boardrooms, it was about a woman who chose to stop shrinking, who stopped making herself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. And the moment she stopped, everything changed. The Stoics had a saying, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Nora couldn't control what Cole did. She couldn't control the betrayal, the humiliation, the photo that ran in the morning papers. But she controlled her response. She went quiet. She built. She chose herself, not loudly, not dramatically, just steadily, one day at a time. And that is something every single one of us can do. You don't need a motorcade outside your door. You don't need a powerful mother or a boardroom or a fund with your name on it. You just need to stop walking through doors that were never meant to hold you. Stop explaining your worth to people who decided your value before you ever opened your mouth. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one. Not for revenge, not to prove anything, simply because you deserve to live at the level you were always capable of. So if this story meant something to you, if Nora's quiet strength reminded you of your own, please hit like, share this with someone who needs to hear it today, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. We'll see you in the next one. And remember, smart people don't argue for their place. They simply return, standing higher than where they left. Take care of yourself. You're worth it. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created purely for entertainment and emotional storytelling purposes. All characters, including Nora Voss, Cole Harrington, Eleanor Voss, James Whitfield, and Danny Prescott, are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real individuals, living or deceased, is completely coincidental. The events, companies, legal proceedings, and financial situations depicted in this story are dramatized and imagined. They are not intended to represent, accuse, or reflect any real person, organization, or actual events. The business structures, legal processes, and financial elements described have been simplified to serve the narrative and should not be interpreted as legal, financial, or professional advice of any kind. The purpose of this content is to explore universal themes of resilience, self-worth, betrayal, and personal growth through fictional storytelling. If you are facing real challenges related to the themes in this story, including relationship difficulties, legal matters, or financial concerns, we strongly encourage you to seek guidance from qualified professionals. Thank you for watching with an open and understanding heart.
Thật là tuyệt vời khi tất cả quý vị và các bạn đã lắng nghe đến giờ phút này. Một lần nữa kênh Silent T xin cảm ơn tất cả quý vị và các bạn đã yêu thích và ủng hộ kênh suốt thời gian qua. Và nếu như yêu thích câu chuyện này, quý vị hãy like, share và comment dưới phần bình luận, đóng góp ý kiến để cho chúng tôi biết được ý kiến của các bạn, để chúng tôi có thể hoàn thiện hơn trong những câu chuyện sắp tới nhé. Một lần nữa xin cảm ơn tất cả quý vị và các bạn và đừng quên ấn like và theo dõi kênh nhé.